So I think there's been an incredible clarification in regard to a certain aspect in regard to Onyx. And let me explain what I mean by that, even though nothing I say is financial advice. So first of all, a lot of people oftentimes like to ask about XCN burning, right? They wonder what's going on when it comes to that. So Onyx, in a recent post, they put like a picture of a big question mark. And the thing is, they said how everyone kept asking about XCN burning. So then the development team or developer team or whatever, they kind of made a clarification in regard to that. Now, let me explain what that is, because from what I can see, actually, it was noted how when it comes to 10%, right, of the transaction fees, basically, when it comes to Goliath, which is Onyx's layer one blockchain that's focused on global chain finance, apparently 10% of that is going to be burned. So in theory, 10% of every transaction fee, right, on Goliath, it's like removed, right? I guess it's burned. That's the thing. In theory, what does that mean? If more is burned, then it becomes more rare. Now, it may be incremental because it's just 10% of transaction fees again on Goliath, but I'm just saying, over time, if that sees better adoption, over time, if let's say we see better integration when it comes to that, in theory, the more popular it is, the more used it is, I would say, it would mean a pretty good thing, I suppose, for Onyx, right? I mean, why would that be a bad thing? Now, people like to say, but it's not 100% of the transaction fees that are burned, though. I understand that. Like, for instance, we take a look at Avalanche. It's a very famous layer one blockchain, right? Its native token called AVAX. People seem to like the tokenomics of that in some cases because Avalanche, if we take a look at it, 100% of the transaction fees, allegedly, they are burned. So that's just taking things one step further in regard to Goliath. But we have to consider Goliath is a lot newer than Avalanche, right? Like in a sense where we have to think about how the mainnet when it comes to Goliath recently launched this year. I mean, it's not like it's been around for years or something like that. Avalanche as a layer one blockchain, it's been famous for many years. That's the thing. So it's a little bit of a different case. But I think, small steps like that, I don't see why it's a bad thing when it comes to Goliath. So when people like to say, oh, wow, the launch of Goliath, it didn't really do anything when it comes to Onyx, it's bad and all this, it's lame. They like to say, oh, it's not going to do anything to the tokenomics. But we recently saw a confirmation in regard to what better adoption, or let's say more transactions, if that were to go on when it comes to Goliath, as to why that could hypothetically mean a good thing when it comes to Onyx, right? Because again, if there's more transactions and 10% of those transactions are burned, why is that a bad thing? I don't get it. If anything, I think it's actually a cool thing. And I think if anything, it gives a little bit more utility, right? When it comes to Onyx in a sense where, if Onyx, or should I say XCN, is used for gas fees on Goliath, that in theory gives it more of a use case. But yeah, besides that point, people oftentimes like to tell me though, well, let's take a look at the circulating supply when it comes to Onyx, still around 38 billion. Well, yeah, I mean, small steps again, right? I mean, Goliath hasn't been around for years. So when people like to say, I don't notice the difference, they like to say that. Well, I mean, how could they really? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, Goliath just hasn't been around for that long. It hasn't been around long enough to kind of see the ripple effects, kind of the impact as to what that could do for the supply when it comes to Onyx. But again, I don't mind because unlike some other projects out there that don't have a set maximum supply, in a sense where some projects out there, the maximum supply is literally infinity. Like for instance, in the case of Dogecoin or Solana, they have an infinite maximum supply. Now they have measures to kind of, I guess, counteract that sort of hypothetical inflation. But I'm just saying, Onyx, first of all, has a set maximum supply. Not to mention, there is arguably a deflationary pressure, right, from the Onyx, or should I say the XCN that is being burned from 10% of the transaction fees that go on when it comes to Goliath, right? At least there is that, I suppose. I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but I'm just saying. And also on top of that, Onyx does have a maximum supply, right? So it doesn't have to deal with some of the nonsense of like, trying to have these very, I guess, complicated measures to try to tone it down like that. Again, first of all, it has a maximum supply, and also there's even a feature, right, to kind of even mitigate that supply and maybe lower it hypothetically through Goliath. So why is that a bad thing? I don't know why that would be considered a bad thing. Keep in mind, is Onyx better right now in 2026 or 2025? Arguably, I think it's better in 2026 fundamentally. Even though we're around 5 times lower than its peak last year, I would think that Onyx actually became 5 times better when compared to last year, fundamentally. The reason why is, first of all, because the mainnet launch of Goliath. I mean, here's the thing. Last year, around $1 billion in terms of market cap, that's not the all-time high when it comes to Onyx in terms of market cap. We've seen it actually reach higher years ago, but that's a different case. That was years ago, a different time, but I'm just saying, if I just take a look at it last year, okay, Onyx reached around $1 billion in terms of market cap. We're around 5 times lower than that. Could you imagine what kind of talks there would be if Bitcoin was around 5 times lower than its all-time high? Everyone would say like, oh, wow, they can't believe it's like that again. They'd be like, oh, it's so cool. Like some of my friends out there, I know they would be so happy in terms of dollar cost averaging if that was the case, which it isn't, but I'm just saying if that was the case. So what I think about it any different here when it comes to Onyx? Some of my friends out there like it if Bitcoin has a pullback because they say, oh, they're accumulating at a hypothetically lower point. Okay, cool. They like Bitcoin, but at the same time, I like Onyx. So I kind of view it no different. It's basically kind of the same principle, liking the quote-unquote dip, personally for me, but just with a different project. This time it's with an altcoin, which Bitcoin is not an altcoin, Onyx is. So yeah, I mean, different project, but I feel like the same principle applies where I like it if it has a pullback for dollar cost averaging personally for me, even though I'm not telling anyone to do anything. But that's just the way you take a look at it. But still, if I'm seeing updates go on, if I'm still seeing Onyx continue to post, if I'm seeing them, I guess improving, as long as I still see stuff like that, yeah, I'm not going to complain, personally. But, people like to say, oh, when is Onyx ever going to recover? I can't control that, but a market recovery, it requires me waiting. That's the main thing. The project changing fundamentally and stuff like that, that's pretty difficult to kind of, I guess, wait for. If the team or the development team or whatever, if they don't care about it, it's a bit tough waiting on that. Waiting on the market sentiment to change, that's different. Onyx can't control the market, right? So the market sentiment changing, it requires me waiting, arguably. But a project changing its mentality, that's sometimes something that I don't know if I could, I guess, alter in a sense where if the team inherently or the development team inherently doesn't really care, then what can I do about it, right? The market sentiment could change, but the mentality still wouldn't really change in that way. So that's why if I see a project that's kind of set fundamentally and I already like the fundamentals, then I don't mind waiting, because at that point, the missing ingredient is just waiting for the market sentiment to change, which I don't mind waiting for. I don't mind waiting if the food is good. That's the thing. In a pure random hypothetical, if I'm waiting for a Rolls-Royce Phantom to arrive, yeah, sure, I'll wait. It's already fundamentally a pretty awesome vehicle, right? At least I would assume. But if, let's say, I'm waiting for a car that broke down 45 times, it's like, come on, seriously? At that point, I don't even want to wait anymore. So that's just kind of the analogy that I have when it comes to the space. I don't mind waiting for the projects that I like fundamentally. That's the basic gist of it. I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you all stay tuned for future upcoming videos. It's Winley the Captain. I'm on. Peace. Bye.